All right, today on the episode, we have Katie Rohn, who is one of the coaches on the Greenhouse team. And she is our newest addition to the team. She hails from Google, and she was a chief of staff there most recently. She's also had a number of different experiences, different types of roles and organizations, different types of sports where she was an athlete. So she brings that really nice kind of generalist perspective to these things. But we're talking today about what it's like to be a chief of staff, what that role is, and how to develop either as a chief of staff or as a leader who works with a chief of staff. And so my favorite thing that Katie brings to this topic, and this is kind of her specialty in coaching, one of her specialties in coaching, is the concept of the 4 relationships. And so she says that a chief of staff has to manage and juggle 4 different key relationships that we talk about in the episode. And a lot of times the problem is there's no blueprint for this role. People don't know what a chief of staff is or should be. A lot of times, therefore, it's undervalued. And yet you have to be interacting with people at a very high level, often a higher level than you, and influencing and managing authority. And yet people don't always understand or value what you do. So it's a very tricky role to navigate. And yet it's becoming more and more popular in the business world. So at Greenhouse, we've coached a lot of chiefs of staff and leaders who have chiefs of staff. And that was one of the fun things about Katie joining the team. She brings this experience from doing it at Google and coaching other chiefs of staff. And that's really her focus on the team. So today we dive in with Katie and Sundie and Chris on the podcast with me. Hey, this is the Roots Up podcast with the Greenhouse coaching team. It's where growth-minded leaders explore growing the life they want, starting at the roots. What's your ideal wave size to surf?
3 feet or 4 feet, pretty small.
Okay.
Okay.
But I'm impressed you've done it.
But you've done, like, how big of a wave have you done? Like what the biggest?
I honestly don't really know.
Yeah.
Definitely not that big.
You don't take a measuring thing out there with you?
Yeah.
Sundie's out there on the beach with a tape measure.
Well, and the hard thing is like you think it's so big in your brain, and then like, from the beach, you're like, wasn't that crazy? Or you see a video and you're like, ooh, that's humbling.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of that.
Do you know how, like, was yours like a big wave? Like, you're one of the raised your hand, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've done it once on like a 3-foot wave.
Oh, okay, great.
Probably smaller.
But you got up, you stood.
Did you?
I did one time. So
don't lie.
It was a friend who lives in Southern California. He got married on Long Beach, Long Beach. And so we surfed in Newport right before, that morning. And
wow,
we all had longish boards. I don't know what's technically a longboard. It was a pretty long board. It wasn't small. And
I think that means it's a longboard.
It wasn't an ugly.
Any surfing audience we do have is now left.
Yeah, no, there's no mid board.
Right.
Yeah, but it was definitely, I was trying all day to like get up and do a whole run, and I did it once.
You did. That's impressive.
But I snowboard, so it's like it wasn't that big of a jump from.
Right.
I mean, it is really hard to learn, especially as an adult, and it's really frustrating. Like there are some moments where I'm like, this is supposed to be fun. And instead I'm so hard on myself because I feel like I should be making more progress and I'm not.
Yeah.
And
right.
It's like the conscious incompetence. You're like, I'm so aware of how not good I am.
I know, especially waiting for the waves. I think I just waited and waited because I thought, well, it's so much work to get out here and get set. I want to wait for the perfect one.
Well, and that's good because I feel like it's a real test of patience. And if you can be patient,
another really great reason to not surf.
Patient for the right wave, patient for like your skill progression, all of it.
Okay, so that's one of your hobbies. The more I've learned about you, you do have a interesting background, like hobbies, career path. So just share for people, like what's the highlight reel?
Oh, that's hard. Well, in terms of hobbies, I would say it's being active and getting outdoors and whatever that looks like. So I grew up as a competitive swimmer, and so a lot of that will be in the ocean.
Yeah.
Whenever possible.
Which is, to me, like a hard swim.
Yeah.
It's not a pool.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, the open water swimming is hard. I just did an open water swim earlier this summer, and it was
really
very challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems hard.
But yeah, I also love things on land. Like I got really into running when I stopped swimming, and now I'm really into cycling. So I feel like being active is a big part of who I am. And then being creative is also a big part of who I am. So that's usually through the form of painting. And I feel like over the past year, I've really like fallen back in love with that and have been able to invest more time in that, which has been huge.
What do you love to paint?
Well, first she's gonna act like she's gonna downplay it, but she's very good.
Okay,
the
you've
paintings
seen
are
that.
very
Yeah,
good.
so quick plug. She wouldn't say it. I'm her first follower on Instagram. I found yesterday she has a Instagram for her art.
Yeah, I just like I just hang out there, and I'm like, one day I'll start to post things.
After
but for
this
now,
episode, it's going to blow up.
Yeah, it's going to go crazy. They're going to see
Resilient
Steve
Hughes
follows you.
art.
It's going to be nuts.
At Resilient Hughes Art on the IGs.
Wow.
But your paintings are really good. It's what style
Go there.
is that called? Impressionist?
I'm very inspired by Impressionist paintings. So it'd probably fall under that category. My mom paints in that style, and I feel like I grew up always like observing her. So I think a lot of that I've sort of adopted from her. But
I love it.
Again, it's like a lot of inspired by nature. So seascapes, landscapes. I love doing like still lives of like shells and things that are like perfectly imperfect from nature.
Ooh,
Very
I like
cool.
that, yeah.
That's cool.
I love like putting a spotlight on the beauty of nature.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's fun. Okay. You guys ready? We're talking about chiefs of staff today.
yeah.
This is
Chiefs of staff.
This is gonna get heated. So like actually this room is hot and
I know.
so where I want to start is Katie, just like your short headline version of what the heck is a chief of staff in the business world. Because I think a lot of people aren't familiar that it's even a role these days, or they just kind of know it in the political scene or something like that.
Yeah.
How would you describe to my mom, who's always listening, what is a chief of staff in the business world?
Okay. It is so hard to explain in like top line version because every chief of staff role is so different from the next. But if I were to generalize it, I would say it is someone that is typically a right-hand person to a leader or working very closely with a leadership team and is maybe a little bit more junior than the leadership team, but is closing gaps or smoothing over conflicts or getting things over the finish line. And I would say if there's sort of like a spectrum here, it sort of moves across the spectrum of operator to strategic. And I think that's what can make it so complex is like you're constantly sort of moving along that spectrum as a chief of staff.
Yeah.
And it will be so specific, or it'll be very unique because there are different principles that people are supporting, different leadership teams, and like the personalities and the energies on that leadership team. And chiefs of staff are at different stage of their career, and you're supporting a business that's at various stages, right? So like that's why this role can be so different depending on, all of those different variables.
Yeah. Yeah. It is interesting how, like in an organization, well, you always need like a head of finance and a head of marketing, and you always need there are certain boxes that have to be filled. But chief of staff can be kind of at the discretion of the leader. Like, did they want a chief of staff? Do they know what it is or how they want to use that role?
Yeah.
Like, what is that interaction? So, how did you, I actually would love to hear everyone's story. Like, how did you first learn about the role of chief of staff? If you can remember. I was trying to remember back, and I'm not sure I know like my first encounter with it, but do you remember?
I remember, yeah. So I was working at Google and I was leading a sales team, and there was an opportunity to support our sales leader at the time, doing like a lot of strategic communications work with that leader. And I immediately gravitated towards that role because I love being an operator, and I also love helping leaders. Like I love being an enabler for others. And I remember when I took on that role, it was like a 20% role. So it's like you're doing that in addition to your core role, but I loved it. And I remember so many people saying like, oh, you're like kind of doing a chief of staff role. And then that got me so curious about it. And I started to sort of like actually look for examples of chiefs of staff out there and what they were doing. And it just like continued to like really confirm like, oh, this is something that I feel like I could do. I'm like interested. So
yeah, that's cool.
It happened very organically.
And then you became one, correct?
And then I became one from there.
Right,
that was
right.
the next role.
Right.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Were there lots of chief of staffs in Google already?
Yes.
Okay.
And what's so interesting, as I was saying before, the chief of staff role, each one is different from the next. I remember feeling even at Google, like every chief of staff that I came across was doing something completely different or at a really different style or different needs so I think that's one of the reasons why it can feel so lonely.
Yes.
But yeah, there were plenty. There were many chiefs of staff there.
That's cool. Do you remember?
I just feel like maybe The West Wing.
Yes.
There you go.
No, this is great.
And it's like, that's kind of the first time I was like, oh, and you got to
Leo.
see it in action. Yeah.
Leo McGarry.
Yeah,
Shout
McGarry.
out. Every time I've coached a chief of staff, I make them watch episodes of West Wing because I
No
just
way.
think they depicted it so well. And they
Yeah.
usually come back to the session like,
So good.
because it's a hidden role. It's like, I mean, everything we're going to talk about
And
today,
really
it's very
important.
Yeah.
like he was running the show, but no one knows.
And you're also kind of like, exactly are they doing
Yeah.
to run the show?
Yeah.
And sometimes what I've noticed is that the CEO or whoever's the lead department that needs that knows, like rumor on the street, they need a chief of staff. But they honestly don't know why 100% they need a chief of staff. Everybody's just telling them they need one, you know?
Yeah. Yes.
And so I feel
Yeah.
like sometimes the two of them come together and they're both a little in the dark. Now, the chief of staff obviously potentially has some experience, but as you said, every role requires a little bit of a different spin on the chief of staff role. But I have met many leaders who don't even know what they're supposed to do with a chief of staff.
Yes. And I
That's
think
right, yeah.
this is one of the biggest challenges for some chiefs of staff is sometimes their principal or the leadership team doesn't know how to use them. And maybe they don't even really know how to be the most effective themselves. And so much of those answers come through and like, what are the business needs and what are the skills of a chief of staff and where can they have the most impact? But like sometimes that can be so challenging to kind of like figure out. And like a job description that a chief of staff, first reads and that role that they accept, like will evolve so quickly. Like even within like 3 months, they may be doing like a completely different role.
Yeah.
Like my job description is completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
I've seen that a lot.
Yeah, I know, because that's similar to how I first learned about it. Was I was at Capital One in the tech group, met for the first time, met a chief of staff, and this person was basically like a glorified admin in their role, and I have a lot of beef with that these days. I don't think
Another
that chief of
pitfall.
staff was being, valued and used in the role appropriately, but that's kind of how it was set up.
Yeah.
And then I eventually moved to the business side of the company and met a chief of staff there who was like very much the Leo McGarry running the show with like a senior vice president. And it was just it was just jolting. It was like, whoa, what? They're not just like organizing an event. They're actually guiding business strategy and facilitating like senior leader meetings. Whoa, this is entirely different. And I thought, that's cool. Like that kind of seems to make more sense.
Yeah, I feel like, so I'm working with this company right now with it's about 50 people, right? And I would say that there are 3 roles right now where they're butting heads. It's the executive admin, the managing director, and the chief of staff. So they all work very closely with that top, but they're really struggling. They're stepping on each other's toes, right?
Yeah.
Because there's
like
sometimes
who owns what?
who owns what, right?
Yeah.
And at what level. And so I just thought it was interesting. And so of course I already, pitched this. Maybe your chief of staff could use some coaching to like, with a very specific focus, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then also that's one thought. That one, first of all, I'll stop there. Do you find that those 3 roles?
Yeah. Well, what I love about what you're saying is I think it's important because the chief of staff role is probably often overlapping with other roles, right? Because sometimes they're filling gaps. So they're having to collaborate with maybe it's people across the organization or their principal or the leadership team. And this can be a challenge because not always they don't always get to own something end to end, right? They're like collaborating on some project or filling in some of those gaps.
Right.
But I think that's where it can be tricky is like, okay, like what do I own and where do I collaborate? And so I see where that can be challenging for those three roles.
Yeah. They're like the ultimate dot connector.
Yeah.
But that's also the ultimate skill that gets overlooked or not understood.
Yeah.
And then my other thought is I was doing some research recently for another company who was asking, do we need, so I'd love your insight here. I don't know if we need a managing director or if we need a chief of staff. Like that was they're like, which one? So I, of course, just did my own little baby research, on what I could find. And please correct me, but it feels like some of the things that I noticed was the managing director was a little bit more like at the level of the CEO. It felt like, and has a lot of power. Like you do this, you do this, you do this.
Yeah.
Like, whereas the chief of staff supports the top person and has to really have a great skill set in influence, collaboration, listening, bringing people together, gathering insight, trust with you get it. It's more like they're amongst the people.
Yeah.
Versus I thought that was the one thing that stood out to me. Any thoughts there?
Yeah. Well, I think that model can be very effective. A lot of it will depend on, what is the tenure or what is like the stage of that chief of staff in their career? Like, are they a little bit more junior? Are they a bit more senior? And what do they want to get out of the role? Because I think when you have maybe a more senior operator in the room that is also sort of like playing some of the chief of staff roles, that's where you can get into a situation where it can be very helpful for that chief of staff to sort of like have someone a bit more senior supporting them in their work or advocating for them or like giving them direction. But also when you have that role, it can create a gap, I think, between the chief of staff and the principal or the leadership team. That's kind of how I'm seeing it. So I feel like it sort of depends on how much experience does that chief of staff have or what is the type of role that they want? Like, right, do they want to be more of an executor or like influencing, building trust? Or do they want to like be playing more of that strategic role, like with leadership and shaping decisions?
Like how much is that guided by the chief of staff saying, here's how I'm going to do it versus the leader asking them to fill a certain role? I think
it sort of depends. And I think these are so many of the conversations that probably need to happen before a chief of staff steps into the role is like sort of figuring out how much they are able to design that. I also feel like a lot of chiefs of staff will step into a role and they're sort of like, doing as the job description, told them to move through the role. And then when they hit like a year and a half or 2 years in, they start to hit this place where they can start to have a conversation with their principal or with anyone else that has influence there to figure out how they want to evolve the role to maybe like mold more of their skills or how they want to grow their career. So that's how I would say it.
Yeah. What you just made me think of in some of your comments, Sundie, is how, like, it just got me reflecting on chiefs of staff I've seen in action and how when it's really good, they're almost kind of like what we do for our jobs, coach and facilitator, is they're kind of the bringer-outer. Like they're the facilitator, the enabler, the catalyst, but their job isn't to be the face of it and to be, getting all the points for the wins. It's to help those leaders be their best, help that team be their best, which is it's what you said earlier, Katie. It's a very sneaky role. You have to be okay with people not really knowing what you're doing or how great that is.
Totally. Yeah. And I would say what you just said that resonates with me the most is enabler.
Okay.
I felt that as a chief of staff and being in generalist operator roles. And I also have felt that in coaching. Like, I think that's what's sort of been like the common thread in my career is like, I really love being an enabler for others. I think the challenge with it that I enjoy is that you really have to understand the person that you are an enabler for or the business that you are an enabler for, because it's not always going to be like the same approach that you're taking.
Yeah.
And so I feel like even with like different clients that I work with, right? Like, how am I going to be the best enabler for you depending on who you are and how you operate?
It's like, even if your friends and family don't understand what you do as a coach, like your clients do, and they appreciate it big time. I thought that with the Leo McGarry, like, okay, everyone else in that White House doesn't understand what the heck he does, but that president and that cabinet, like those top, not the cabinet, but like those top leaders understand his value. And I think, I don't know, that's interesting. I think about one of my good friends who's been a chief of staff a long time. And even as a very senior, tenured chief of staff, she struggles with how other people don't really understand the value she brings. But the leaders she's supported, wow.
Really sees it.
They're like, this is my favorite person in the whole organization.
Is your process one in which you would coach the new chief of staff or a transitioning chief of staff? Would you also spend time with who they're supporting as a coach?
That's a great question.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually not something I've thought about, but I think it would be a really powerful way to approach that relationship. I mean, it's tricky, right? Because like in the world of coaching, you like want to honor that confidentiality. And so even if you are talking to a chief of staff and their principal, you're not necessarily going to be like, well, this person said this. As a coach, it's probably helpful to figure out how you can be that enabler for the chief of staff. But yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, it made me think about you. I feel like you have done at Capital One. You have broken people's
We're also saying,
confidentiality.
for everyone just
This is an intervention, Steve.
we're sitting very close together on a couch. That's good.
I feel like you had a relationship with someone who was a chief of staff who was just really struggling getting through to their particular.
Yeah.
And I feel like when you were coaching them, you intervened and did something with the two of them.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what made me feel like.
Yeah, that's kind of what got me interested in we'll talk about relationships, marriages, couple therapy stuff a lot at Greenhouse. I mean, it does come into coaching just naturally. You're coaching a whole person who has relationships. But I think that's where I first started getting kind of more interested in that stuff, because really what you're doing, and I've done it also with like CEO, COO, where you're really helping to resolve conflict, teach communication skills, and help them get rhythms to stay synced up. It's the same. I mean, it's the same as great marriage coaching. It's the same exact mechanisms. And I just thought, oh, how cool. Yeah, because we live in this weird part of history where like for the whole entire history of the world, people understood that work was relationships. And then we came on the heels of this tiny time period of like 100 years where we thought, nope, we're just robots at work. And you just go and do tasks, and relationships don't have anything to do with it. And now I think what's happening in a macro level is we're realizing again, like, oh no, it's all about relationships. This is why coaching is getting so popular. So I think that's actually what was cool about that.
I think it was so too. What problem would you say that you resolved for them by being in the same space as the two of them?
It was those three things. It was, how do you resolve conflict? Because otherwise it just stays simmering below the surface until it blows up into a huge catastrophe. Or
nobody does that at work, though.
No one does that. I mean, that's as a coach, that's becoming my main. I'm like, that's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. So it's like actually surfacing conflict and dealing with it in a good, healthy way. Then on like taking that forward a step and creating positive rhythms for communication.
That one's big, right?
Because they weren't communicating. They thought like they were thinking like logical analysts do in the workplace. Oh, we can just both go do our jobs. And I'm not judging. This is like what me and Ashley do in our marriage all the time. Like we can both independently go do our things in our own lanes, and then it's all going to be great. And the reality is like, no, they have to be synced up on a daily basis, knowing what's in your head, you knowing what's in my head, and like organizing the work. And so we started getting those rhythms in place. How can you guys talk every morning for 15 minutes and every week for an hour? And that was to them like,
oh my gosh.
You can't do that. There's no time for that. I'm like, then you don't have time to run an organization.
Right. That's
like, that's actually the most important thing.
Yeah.
Or everything else falls apart.
True. Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I'm curious if anyone disagrees with that. That was just like, that became my soapbox through that work.
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's awesome. The words that are jumping out to me are communication and empathy. Like I feel like so much of it boils down to that. And I think what makes relationships in any capacity so complex is that you have two people coming in with their own worldviews, their own perspectives, their own experiences, and they're like trying to meet each other. And that's where I feel like communicating where you're coming from and like what you're observing, right? Like communicating from this sort of like neutral place. And then also having the empathy that like someone, the other person at the other end is going to may have a different experience that is shaping that. And I think that's what can be so challenging.
Yeah, because it's so challenging. And if they can start to get it right, can be so, so valuable when they can. Leo McGarry, like he can both be the bad cop when the president needs to be the face of it and everyone still like him. You know, that's a dynamic. But it's also the like ears to the ground versus eyes at the top. So the point leader has to often make really hard decisions and be, you know, at the tip of the point with strategy, whereas the chief of staff can help understand what all the people in the organization are thinking and feeling. And like, they don't have time to be, even if they had time to be in touch with that, people aren't going to be honest with them.
Yeah.
And I've seen good chiefs of staff, like people will be more honest with them. They can have a better sense of what's happening at the ground level.
Yeah.
And then that's a beautiful synergy. Like if that relationship has both parts of the information and the roles.
Well, that's why I think the 4 relationship framework is so powerful. We want to go
look
there.
at that transition.
Wow. Have you been on a podcast before?
No.
That was amazing.
Oh, that was good.
We're ruining it. But
Okay.
No, this is good. Yeah. Well, I think, you know, what you were talking about earlier with the chief of staff and the principal that you worked with together, I think is a really interesting way of thinking about this, because with the 4 relationship framework, it's starting with the relationship with yourself. So if you're a chief of staff, understanding how you relate to the world. So like, what are the beliefs that you have about yourself and the value that you bring? Are you walking into a room of leaders feeling like, oh, I don't know if that person likes me, or like, did I do okay in that other meeting, right? Like all of these are narratives that we're holding on to and could be like taking away from other things.
Yeah.
And totally influence the way that we take action. And so if you're able to start there, then it starts to affect all the other relationships that follow, the one with your principal, the one with the leadership team, and the one with the broader organization. And I think similar to the approach that you took, Steve, and this is why I think coaching is so powerful, is like actually starting with yourself and connecting with like, what do I need? What stories am I telling myself that are not serving me? Or how do I want to grow my career? Like just starting with the internal and then moving forward to the external from there is so powerful. And it allows a chief of staff to do it in a way that relates like most closely to them. Because this role can be so different, as we were talking about earlier, it allows like it honors that unique quality and makes it tailored to you. So
yeah, I also think it's interesting because like some other roles, the chief of staff has sort of a lot of space to it, like you were saying earlier. So to like find your center with yourself first, and the things that you bring to the table, the things that you want to do in the role, I think it's like really helpful because it could be kind of this wide open space of problems to help the business solve or the principal solve. But and from that place, you can start to think about how to approach that or delegate or
completely,
you know, what you want to do.
I have a question. What would you say to a listener that was listening?
It would be good if that was happening. That's usually done.
I really appreciate
they
that.
hit play, then they hit mute, and there's
turn the volume way down.
We've had a number of listeners say that they listen while they do the dishes. So there could be a lot of clanking happening.
Yeah. Or the mind is wandering.
Yeah.
Okay, so if they choose to listen that day, you know, and they're thinking they need coaching. Let's just say I'm a chief of staff. I'm listening, and what would make me decide I can just choose any executive coach or a coach versus a coach who has the specialty in it? You know, there's a lot of discussion about this sometimes. Like, does it matter if I have someone who lands in that expertise? Or because we all know that we coach people who are in tech that I'm not in tech, but I know how to coach them. But what would you say is one of the benefits of the fact that you have the experience? I mean, it feels a little bit intuitive as I'm asking this, but I'd love to hear what you have to say there.
Yeah. Well, I have several thoughts on this, but the one that's actually bubbling up to the surface the most is the fact that I sort of like, I understand the type of person that might be in this role. And I feel like I actually take that approach. Like I bring that to my coaching and my style of coaching. So I would say like in my coaching, I sort of have this like mix of kind of like warm cheerleader and like, I'm like, you can do it. Like there's that. And then on the other side of it, there's a lot of like structure and directness. And like, that's where I feel like a lot of the chief of staff energy comes through and where someone might be able to relate to, a coach for chiefs of staff, like someone that has been in the role and has that perspective of what that is like, and therefore can bring that flavor to the coaching.
Can I add something to that I've observed about you? So I think that it's like an and to what you just said, and you know how they feel, which is I think a unique combination of feelings because it's both like you're highly valued and you do bring tons of value to the table. And again, like the people closest to you understand that, but you're also very undervalued because people don't understand the role, and you're junior among people really senior to you often. Like oftentimes you're in the room with people a lot more senior, but you have to influence at the same level as them. Yeah. So it's this weird thing of like, it's exciting and pressure. It's like really fulfilling and sometimes frustrating. And I think I've just noticed that you understand those mix of feelings, whereas another coach might not get that because it's so unique in terms of roles out there.
Yeah.
I think it would put, personally, if I was a chief of staff and I knew that I was going to someone who had that experience, it would just put me at ease. Just a feeling like, I could probably get a lot out of a relationship with the coach because, they're often pulling out and identifying things within me, right? Which is so beautiful. But I could see myself trusting a little bit more in the process if I just knew that you had been in my shoes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's something about like being able to be a like pure coach and like, why is it important to you? And then also be able to move into the territory of advisor when someone needs that, right? When they're like, well, what's your POV? And it's like, okay, let me step out of the coaching world for a second and I'll offer a POV. Or I'll offer like, here's what I'm observing. And to have the background in the role, I think helps when you sort of move more towards that direction.
Yeah, it's probably my favorite space to live. You know that is like I really am a coach who has a lot of consultative hats with myself from my life experiences. Like, so when people want, hey, how do you do that? If they want it, I got some how-tos, right? Not just exploration. So I really love that space.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, well, I would love to hear like a little synopsis of the 4 relationships because I'm intrigued.
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, so the first relationship is the relationship with yourself. And that's the foundation. It all starts from there. And then you have the relationship with your principal, which, as we all know, is very, very important. A work marriage, some may call it. Then you have the relationship with the leadership team. So everyone on that principal's leadership team. And then the last one is the relationship with the broader organization and everyone within that.
So having a strategy to navigate all 4 of those look differently, feel differently, and you need to think about it.
Completely. And they're usually pretty intertwined. So like working on one relationship will likely affect how you show up in the others.
Sure.
And so thinking about, I think for any chief of staff, again, so much of it starts with a relationship with yourself. But from there, then starting to investigate, where do some of my relationships feel a little bit strained, or where does it feel like I could be investing a bit more energy that then would sort of impact all the other relationships that follow, right? Like if your relationship with your principal isn't great, it's probably going to be hard to connect with the leadership team or vice versa. And then like that sort of continues on into like the way that you connect with the broader organization.
Yeah.
So
what would be your recommendation for someone, like if a chief of staff's listening, how should they think about where to start? Like which of those relationships to focus on, or how to assess how those 4 are going?
Yeah, I would start with yourself. And again, this is where I would think about what are some of the narratives that I'm carrying around with me every day, and how is that affecting the way that I show up? And then from there, thinking about, okay, so thinking about a given day or a given week, where are there moments where I feel a little bit uneasy or like I want to be showing up differently or I want to be having more impact, or I feel like if I could show up in that way, it would help me grow my career, and assessing like which relationship is that connected to? Is it with your principal? Is it with the leadership team? Or is it with the broader organization? And I feel like that's a really good place to start. And then again, so much unfolds like from just like investing in that.
What happens if you're like, what happens if the chief of staff's priorities or view of that conflict with the principal, the point, their leader's view?
Yeah, this is where I feel like the complexity of relationships really comes into play. And I mean, I do feel like if you can invest in your relationship with yourself and like build some, whether it's like building confidence or like I want to be able to feel empowered in this relationship with a figure that is in an authority position, you might start to see so much unfold in terms of the way that you communicate with that person. So I don't know, I feel like so much of it comes down to communication and your mindset.
I feel like just having that conversation about the 4 relationships is going to be an eye-opening experience.
Yeah.
Just because I feel like, you know how it is, sometimes we're like muddling through this life and we're not being intentional about something. And someone brings that intentionality to us and we're like, oh, I just feel like calling out even the 4 relationships and checking in with yourself on the principal, the leadership team, the broader. Yeah. It's such a like, I can feel the eye-opening experience for them just thinking about it.
Yes, the conversation, because I'm thinking about an executive leader who's listening to this. They're probably not aware that person's balancing, managing all 4 of those. And they might just think, oh, this person's just my right hand to do what I need them to do. It's like, they're actually trying to balance like a lot of things here.
Yeah, some empathy around that. But how uncomfortable for a chief of staff that is so used to like execution, output, deliver a million priorities, like so many things on the to-do list, to say, oh, I'm actually going to slow down and reflect on these relationships. Like that can feel really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because likely somebody who got to that role has been in those like managing projects and people things.
Yeah. And this is why I feel like coaching can really stretch people in really powerful ways, because you're creating this container to slow the pace down and to like actually reflect.
The thing I love about focusing on the relationships is that it takes the focus. Yes, you want to like start with yourself, but it takes the focus off of like what your skills are, because like it's such a, like we said earlier, like broad role, and people bring so many different career paths and experience to that role. So instead of walking into the office worrying about like, okay, well, am I strong enough on strategic planning, or do I understand do I fully understand the culture of this organization, or what the objectives are? Like, where are my gaps? Where are my skills? It's like, no, it's like you get centered and you think about the relationships and like where those are and where you need to work on that. Yeah.
And it becomes so clear from there, like where you need to invest. Right. And I think that is very common, right? Like if someone is in a role where they want to be having more impact, a chief of staff, this could be anyone, right? Where they want to be having more impact, or they're trying to figure out how they want to grow their career, you will likely have people in your life that are like, do this, or like try this way, or this is a best practice. And that is great when you can recognize, okay, like I am my own person and I'm going to take that in and decide if it's useful for me or not. But for others that haven't taken the time to figure out, okay, like what do I need? Then you're just taking in everyone else's filter of like how they have perceived life or how they define success. And that can be really confusing, right? It's sort of like this one size fits all approach, like do it this way, or go work on that skill. And then it adds this layer of shame for the person that's receiving it. It's like, oh, I'm not good enough. Like I need to go work on this thing. I need to go build this skill. Like I'm not enough. Yeah. Versus the other approach, versus this approach of like focusing on the relationships, you're actually just like recognizing what's already here. And like, what do I want to tweak? Like, let me not add anything else to my list of things. And like, let me actually just kind of slow down and pause here.
Yeah. So cool. What would you say being a chief of staff, how did it change you for the better as you went forward in your career?
Oh, that is a really good question. I feel like it gave me perspective. I think it actually gave me this door to actually like really start thinking for myself. And really start designing my career in a way that was aligned with my values and what was going to be most fulfilling for me. Like when I think about the trajectory of my career, I think that was a really big turning point. I learned so much and I got exposure to so much, and B, it was really challenging.
Yeah.
And I think through both of those things, there's so much insight that's wrapped up in that. I think it really pushed me to be like, go, what's most aligned for you? And for me, it was like, stay on this enabler track, but like, what could that actually look like? And I think that's when coaching like really started to come through for me. So
I was thinking about the skills that are so necessary for it. I mean, you mentioned some of them, empathy, communication, right?
yeah.
I was thinking about how in observing this chief of staff and the CEO has the chief of staff a part of every single call and every meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the trust, I was just thinking, oh my
Huge.
God. And like when you were talking about the 4 relationships, I was even imagining like sometimes the leadership team is like, it's a he, like, why is he in here? Like, it's a very difficult, it's a hard one at first. Like people feel like he doesn't have a place here. Do you know what I mean? But of
Or
course,
if you feel that as a chief of staff, you're like,
or you feel
do they
it as a
really
chief.
want me
Right,
here?
absolutely.
Yeah. Can I speak up?
Yeah.
Am I
Yes.
supposed
What
to be quiet?
is my role?
Yeah. Am I supposed to hear this right now?
in that space? Yeah. I was just thinking about the dynamics of that. But of course, what I'm seeing that's beautiful, that's working there is because the trust is between the two of them.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to now meet with his chief of staff and fill him in on everything. It's like,
Well,
you were
and
there.
yeah, even if they did that, the filling in part would be incomplete because
right.
a lot of the value in the chief of staff being there is afterward they can say, Sundie, let me tell you how you showed up in that meeting.
Right.
Do you
Yeah.
realize your blind spot that actually like people were really mad at you about this one thing?
So
it's,
true.
It's like
I've
that,
seen- yes.
that coaching part of
Yep.
they have an eye
Yeah.
on how things are going and can be sometimes the only safe place or person to give that feedback.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
It's I was just thinking about trust, and then I was thinking about coaching a new chief of staff on how to have a voice
Yeah.
with their CEO, because they are going to have some really amazing observations that another lens is going to be very helpful, but scary,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Well, and I think so much of what you were just saying, Steve, comes back to that relationship between the chief of staff and the principal, and like what does that look like, and what is going through the chief of staff's brain and the principal's brain as they're having that conversation. Because if the chief of staff is coming from a place of, oh, I need to please, or I need to make sure like they feel good, right? Like they may not be giving all of that information.
Right.
They might not be giving the tough feedback. And right, that comes from a relationship with yourself, that comes from the relationship you have with the principal. So like if all these things aren't lining up, you aren't putting yourself in a position to do that and to
Right.
effectively build that trust.
and even the positive side of that, like, hey, okay, I think the team's feeling a little
Yes,
nervous about all the
absolutely.
changes. So I think today, like, you should
Yeah.
show up this way and really
Yeah.
like reassure them. It can be feedback also like preemptively.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and maybe as a chief of staff too, you're feeling like, oh, if there's anything that they're doing that I need to doing wrong, like quote unquote wrong, right? Like I need to give some hard feedback here. Because the chief of staff is so attached to that principal, there might be the feeling of like, oh wait, does that mean I'm not delivering, right? Like if they're not delivering, am I not delivering? So I'm a little bit scared to give that, because then am I saying like, I'm not really doing my job effectively?
Yeah. And this
So I
is
can see
my
how there'd
boss
be
after
like
all.
some fear on
Yeah,
that.
it's scary.
Yeah.
Interesting dynamic. So that's all. I was just thinking about that
Yeah.
as well. So that's another layer.
Yeah.
Well, that was a fun episode. I think there's probably 3 or 4 more hours we could have kept going with that. What I would say is if you are a chief of staff, let us know, because Katie runs a segment of Greenhouse just for chiefs of staff. And so you can find her on Instagram. It's Greenhouse, Greenhouse_chief_of_staff. Greenhouse chief of staff. She also has a YouTube channel. A lot of good resources there and coaching programs for that. But I think it's also really relevant for executive leaders who either have a chief of staff and you're not quite sure how to leverage them to the max, or you don't have one and you really need that that sidekick. You need that number two who can be kind of your general manager, your trusted sidekick and coach. We often help leaders get a chief of staff in place and train them to maximize the impact, because that is an absolute must if you are a high level leader, especially in today's constantly changing and increasing complex workplace. So if you're a leader or know a leader, I would pass this episode on. But yeah, if you want to get in touch, you can go to the website, greenhousecoaching.co, and send us a message and chat with Katie or start connecting with her resources. Thanks for listening today.